Today we're going to start off with chapter 10, which is aggregate demand. For this particular chapter, we're going to make use of PowerPoint slides. What you see on the screen here is the big picture. This is what we are trying to establish. There are few components which we have already developed, but there are still many components that we still have to develop. So if you look closely, we in chapter number 9, we have already established the aggregate demand and aggregate supply model. This is the Keynesian model. And the model of aggregate demand and aggregate supply, it helps explain the short-run fluctuations in the economy. Okay, so we have already established this part of the picture in the previous chapter, which was chapter number 9. Now, we're going to go back a little and we're going to try to understand the full mechanism behind the aggregate demand curve. मैंने पिछले चैप्टर में आपको थोड़ा एक ओवरव्यू दिया था as to the derivation of the aggregate demand curve, and I told you that aggregate demand can be derived using the quantity theory of money, or I gave 4 different explanations as to how it can be derived with the help of national income account identity. उसी कॉन्सेप्ट को हम जो है ना थोड़ा सा मजीद एक्सप्लोर करेंगे इस पर्टिकुलर चैप्टर में. And you would see that aggregate demand and aggregate demand curve can be derived with the help of ISLM model. Okay, so IS model, it stands for investment and saving model, and the LM curve, it stands for liquidity and money model. Okay, so the IS curve hai, it actually captures what is happening in the goods market, whereas the LM curve captures what's happening in the money market. And the way you derive the IS curve is with the help of the Keynesian cross, and the way you derive the LM curve is with the help of theory of liquidity preference. Okay, so जो चीजें हम कर चुके हैं वो ये हैं. Okay, in chapter number 9, we have already developed the Keynesian model, which is the model of aggregate demand and aggregate supply. और ये जो model है ना, it explains the short-term fluctuations in the economy. And this model is also powerful enough to predict कि एक policy का impact क्या होगा in the short run, and then you can also trace the impact of that policy in the long run as well. So ये हम component already पिछले chapter में establish कर चुके हैं. इस chapter में we're going to develop the ISLM model, which you will see in chapter number 11 कि इस model से भी आप aggregate demand curve derive कर सकते हैं. Okay, so let's just start with that now. पहले मैं आपको थोड़ा सा overview दे दूं about the ISLM model. So the IS model, it plots the relationship between interest rate and the level of income that arises in the market for goods and services. Okay? So just keep this in mind that IS curve जो है ना वो दो चीजों के दरमियान relationship capture करता है. That is the interest rate and income, which can be depicted by Y. So it captures the relationship between interest and income in the goods market, whereas the LM curve plots the relationship between interest and level of income that arises in the money market. मैंने अभी थोड़ी देर पहले आपसे यही बात की थी कि IS curve, it represents what's happening in the goods market. It's going to capture the relationship between R and Y in the goods market, whereas the LM curve is going to capture the relationship between R and Y in the money market. So the model shows, the ISLM model together, it shows interaction between goods and money markets and how that determines the position and slope of the aggregate demand curve. Okay, so with the help of this ISLM model, we will actually derive the aggregate demand curve. Unfortunately, ये जो derivation है aggregate demand curve की, ये हम अगले chapter में पढ़ेंगे. इस chapter में we are only going to focus on developing this ISLM model. So this is the complete picture. I'm showing you the complete picture at this point. कि आपको पता हो कि ये हमारा objective है, ये हमने derive करना है. So the downward sloping curve is the IS curve. ठीक है? When you're plotting the IS curve, वही बात मैं repeat करूँगी. It captures the relationship between interest rate and Y. Okay, so IS curve, it's capturing what's happening in the goods market, whereas the LM curve is capturing what's happening in the money market. IS curve, you will see it's downward sloping, LM curve is upward sloping. It's the interaction of the two which will help determine the equilibrium interest rate and the equilibrium level of income in the market. And this is the combination of R and Y which will ensure equilibrium in both the goods market and in the money market simultaneously. Okay, so this is what we are intending to do in this chapter. We want to derive the IS and LM curve. Before we move on to the derivation, थोड़ा सा मैं आपको context दे दूं behind this particular chapter. So in chapter number 9, we introduced the model of aggregate demand and aggregate supply. So in the long run, we assumed that prices flexible हैं. Output is determined by factors of production and technology. So we said that the production output is determined by a production function, whereas the unemployment is equal to is the natural rate. Whereas short run में हम assume करते हैं कि prices are fixed. Output is determined only by aggregate demand. Do you remember when looking at the aggregate demand and aggregate supply model, in the short run, output was determined where the price line, which is also called the short run aggregate supply curve, where that equals the aggregate demand curve. And unemployment is negatively related to output level. Long run में तो हमने assume किया था ना कि unemployment equals the natural rate. यानी in the long run we assumed कि जितना labor है वो fully employed है. Whereas in the short run, unemployment can diverge from the full employment rate. ठीक है? It can be different from the full employment rate. अगर unemployment the natural rate of output से कम है, we assume that there's going to be recession in the economy. इसीलिए यहाँ लिखा हुआ है कि unemployment is negatively related to output. जाहिर सी बात है, जब output कम होगा, जब economy recession में होगी, unemployment ज़्यादा होगी. When economy is producing more, when there is economic boom in the economy, unemployment rate is going to be lowered. So this chapter, it develops the ISLM model, the theory that yields the aggregate demand curve. हमने पिछले चैप्टर में मैंने थोड़ा सा बैकग्राउंड आपको दिया हुआ है कि एग्रीगेट डिमांड हम किस तरह डिराइव करते हैं, लेकिन हम उसी को अब ज्यादा सिस्टमैटिकली मैं डेवलप करना चाह रही हूँ इस चैप्टर में. We focus on the short run and assume that prices are fixed. So this chapter and in the next chapter we're going to focus on the closed economy. ठीक है? We'll continue to assume that net exports is zero, whereas in chapter number 12 we're going to consider the case of the open economy. Okay, now let's just start off with deriving the IS curve. अगर आपको big picture याद है, मैंने आपको कहा था कि IS curve is derived with the help of the Keynesian cross. ठीक है? So let's first see what is the Keynesian cross. So we're going to first derive the Keynesian cross. क्योंकि जब हम ये derive करेंगे तब आपको समझ आएगी कि इस Keynesian cross से हम IS curve फिर किस तरह derive कर सकते हैं. लेकिन derivation से पहले कुछ notations हैं which you should be familiar with. Actual expenditure, this is denoted by Y. This is the amount that households, firms, and governments spend on goods and services. Okay? You can think of actual expenditure as the actual supply of goods and services. ठीक है? देखिए जब हम कहते हैं ना actual expenditure is the amount that households, firms, and governments spend on goods and services. So let's suppose I actually spend on commodity A, B, and C. I actually purchase commodity A, B, and C. So ये purchase तभी possible है when A, B, and C are being supplied. ठीक है? So actual expenditure को जो है ना, you can think of this as the supply of goods and services, whereas planned expenditure, which is denoted by E, this is the amount that households, firms, and government would like to spend on goods and services. Okay? In other words, planned expenditure is actually the demand for goods and services. Okay? The amount that you want to spend on goods and services, which you are planning to spend on goods and services. So remember that planned expenditure is actually the demand for goods and services. So the economy is going to be in equilibrium when the actual expenditure or when the supply for goods and services is equal to is the planned expenditure, which is the demand for goods and services. ठीक है, तो ये बड़ी important identity है. So what we are saying is that in equilibrium, जो आपका actual supply होगा, your actual expenditure, your actual spending should be equal to is your planned expenditure, or how much you would like to spend on goods and services, or the demand for goods and services. So putting it simply, in equilibrium, Y should equal E. Okay. So again, keep this in mind that Y is actually the actual supply of goods and services, and E is the planned demand, or E is the demand for goods and services. Okay. So if you remember, consumption depends upon your disposable income. So I'm saying here that C, it's a function of disposable income. Okay. So the relationship between disposable income and C is positive. You know that if disposable income increases, consumption is going to increase. So अगर disposable income $1 से increase होती है, consumption is also going to increase. But mind you, consumption is going to increase by less than $1. The reason is because of MPC, which is the marginal propensity to consume, which tells me the increase in consumption brought about by unit increase in disposable income. हमें पता है कि अगर disposable income $1 से increase होती है, consumption increase होगी, but most probably it's going to increase by less than $1 because people tend to save as well. Okay, MPC is usually less than 1. Therefore, disposable income में जो increase होगी, that will result in a smaller increase in consumption. Relationship positive है, लेकिन relationship 1-to-1 नहीं है. अगर disposable income $100 से increase होती है, तो consumption increase होगी, but less than $100. Now, G is the government spending, and we're assuming it to be exogenous. T is tax revenue, which is again assumed to be exogenous. For the time being, we are assuming that investment is also exogenous. So we are taking investment to be fixed here. So planned expenditure, or the demand for goods and services, is equal to is your consumption expenditure, your investment expenditure, and the government spending. So equilibrium condition is where the actual expenditure, that is where Y equals your planned expenditure, which is this entire thing. Okay, which comprises of consumption. ठीक है, मैं खाली इसको highlight करना चाह रही हूँ, लेकिन चलें, okay. So E is basically this. E is basically, it comprises of these 3 components: consumption, investment, government spending. Since we're assuming closed economy, net exports falls out of the equation. Now let's graph this planned expenditure. Now, in order to do so, जब हम Keynesian cross derive करते हैं, या जब उसको draw करने की attempt करते हैं, what you do is you take Y, which is the actual output or the supply for goods and services on the x-axis. You take E, which is the planned expenditure on the y-axis. Now, planned expenditure line आपके सामने बनाई गई है. When Y is 0, okay, let me just put it this way. आप देख सकते हैं कि planned expenditure जो है ना, it looks something like this. Why is that the case? हमने अभी establish किया कि I fixed है, G fixed है. So, or you can say that I, it doesn't depend upon Y. G doesn't depend upon Y. C, consumption, is the only variable that depends upon Y. So if Y is going to increase, consumption increases, and as a result, E increases. The demand for goods and services increases. Hence, the positive relationship between Y and E. ठीक है, मैं दोबारा रिपीट कर रही हूँ कि देखिए, जब Y increase होता है, तो that means disposable income increases. When disposable income increases, C will increase. When C increases, E will increase. But remember, if C increases by $1, E increase तो कर रहा है, but it's increasing by less than $1. The reason is because of MPC. MPC, which is the marginal propensity to consume, it's less than $1. ठीक है? If MPC is equal to is, let's suppose if this is equal to is 0.7, what this means is कि अगर disposable income में $8 का इजाफा होगा तो consumption increases by 7 cents और बाकी जो 3 cents है ना, you are actually saving that amount. So that's the reason why the planned expenditure curve upward sloping तो है, लेकिन इसका slope की जो slope है ना, आप note करें, it's less than 1. एक और चीज जो आपको स्ट्राइक करनी चाहिए वो ये है कि देखिए when y is 0, e is some positive value. The reason is even if you're not earning anything, for survival आपको थोड़ा बहुत तो कंज्यूम करना पड़ेगा ना, मतलब मे बी आप बोरो करके वो अपने कंजम्पशन एक्सपेंडिचर को पूरा कर रहे हैं या किसी और तरीके से पूरा कर रहे हैं. तो what we're saying is when y is 0, c is again some positive number because you need something for survival. ठीक है, कुछ तो आपने कंज्यूम करना है just to survive. So that is why when y is 0, e is going to be some positive value. So ऊपर से ये e curve शुरू होगा, it is upward sloping, but remember the slope is going to be less than 1. The reason is because MPC is usually less than 1. अब अगर इसको दोबारा देख लें, देखिए E की इक्वेशन ये है, इसमें I कांस्टेंट है, G कांस्टेंट है. इफ यू रिमेंबर स्लोप क्या होता है, स्लोप मतलब if you want to calculate the slope of this curve, the slope is going to be equal to is MPC in this particular case. अच्छा, so this is all about the planned expenditure curve. Now, here I'm drawing a 45-degree line. देखिए, ये 45-degree line basically show करेगी all the points where E is equal to is Y. ठीक है, ये 45-degree line is going to show that if Y is 10, यानी if supply is 10, demand is also going to be 10. If supply is 20, the demand is also going to be 20. So इस line पे 45-degree line, it contains all the points where equilibrium holds. It contains all the points where supply equals the demand, where your planned expenditure is equal to is your actual expenditure. Now putting the two together gives me the Keynesian cross. ठीक है, मैंने अब एक ही ग्राफ पे I have drawn this 45-degree line which contains all the points where supply equals demand, and I've also plotted the planned expenditure curve, which अभी हमने देखा when y is 0, it starts off from a positive value, and as y increases, E increase तो करता है, but it's going to increase by less than the increase in y because your MPC is less than 1. ठीक है, people tend to, अगर y increase होता है तो people tend to save a chunk of their increase in income and consume the rest. अच्छा, अब जहां ये दोनों intersect कर रहे हैं, yeah, so what you're seeing is that this is the point where the two curves intersect. This is going to be your equilibrium. ठीक है, this is the point where supply equals the demand. ये जो दोनों कर्व्स को जब मैंने एक साथ बनाया ना, आप देख सकते हैं क्रॉस की शक्ल बनती है, इसको कहा जाता है केन्जियन क्रॉस. Okay, so equilibrium is going to be established where the two curves intersect one another. So I've stated this point over here as well. The 45-degree line, y is equal to E. It plots the points where equilibrium condition hold. यानी देखो इस लाइन के ऊपर ही कहीं equilibrium hold करेगा. कहाँ exactly hold करेगा? Where this E cuts this 45-degree line. तो इसको मैं y star को मैं equilibrium कह रही हूँ. ठीक है, y1 को मैं equilibrium नहीं कह सकती, y2 को भी मैं equilibrium नहीं कह सकती. The reason is as follows. Now, how does the economy get to this equilibrium? ठीक है, the reason यहाँ specify हुआ है कि inventories play an important role in the adjustment process. Let me explain. This is an important point, and let me explain you this point. देखिए y1 पे आप नोट करें, इसको मैं इक्विलिब्रियम नहीं कह सकती। क्यों नहीं कह सकती? क्योंकि एट I1 आपका जो एक्चुअल एक्सपेंडिचर है, यानी जो आपके जो सप्लाई है, दैट्स मोर देन द डिमांड। ऐसे ही है ना कि y at this point is greater than E, ठीक है? सप्लाई इज मोर देन डिमांड। सो व्हाट इज हैपनिंग टू इन्वेंट्री? जब आपकी एक्सेसिव प्रोडक्शन हो रही है, डिमांड उतनी है नहीं, प्रोड्यूस आप ज्यादा करें, तो यू आर एक्चुअली बिल्डिंग अप योर इन्वेंट्रीज, ठीक है? इन्वेंट्रीज में खामखा चीजें आप पाइल अप किए जा रहे हैं, वो बिक नहीं रही। सो एज अ रिजल्ट व्हाट विल यू डू? यू विल ले ऑफ वर्कर्स। सो व्हेन यू ले ऑफ वर्कर्स, y is going to decrease, and it's going to decrease to a level until we reach y star. Similarly, y2 को मैं equilibrium नहीं कह सकती, because at y2 you can see for yourself that the planned expenditure जो कि E है, that's greater than the actual expenditure which is Y. In other words, what you can see here is that the supply, जो कि ये नीचे वाला point है, the supply is less than the demand. So what must be happening to the inventories? Supply कम है, demand ज़्यादा है, production कम है, demand ज़्यादा है, यानी you're actually depleting your inventories. ठीक है? जो इन्वेंट्री में चीजें पड़ी नहीं है ना, वो निकल रही हैं, because there's a lot of demand for the product. So you're depleting your inventories. So in order to maintain your inventory to an appropriate level, you're now going to hire more workers. When you hire more workers, production increase होगी, and as a result, I'm going to move to Y bar. Okay. So when you hire more workers, आप देख सकते हैं आपको पे करना पड़ेगा उन्हें. You have to pay them wages. So their income is going to increase, and the process continues until I achieve Y star. So at Y star, inventory का क्या status है? In the inventory, जितनी demand है, उतनी ही supply है. Alright. So in other words, inventory will be zero. ठीक है? जो अगर आप एक चीज मतलब वन प्रोडक्ट इन्वेंट्री में डाल रहे हैं, वो उसी टाइम वो प्रोडक्ट जो है ना सेल आउट हो रहा है. सो there's nothing in your inventory at a given point in time. अच्छा, तो ये तो दिस इज ऑल अबाउट केन्जियन क्रॉस. अब सवाल ये पैदा होता है कि इस केन्जियन क्रॉस से हाउ डू वी डिराइव द IS कर्व? लेकिन बिफोर वी गो into the derivation, कुछ आपको जो है ना, there's a few we're going to do a few more exercises to see how we can make use of this Keynesian cross in determining different policy implications. Okay, so we're going to continue from here in the next slide or in the next part.